welcome everyone. I'm Jen Mazer, the Queen of Manifestation, and I'm so excited to have you here for Manifesting Peace. I really felt called to have this global conversation at this time because as we can all feel it, we're in a time of great change. And I think this is the time we can manifest greater peace within ourselves, our communities, and in the world. And I truly believe that if you can imagine it, you can create it. So I've gathered some of my favorite people around the world to share their voices, their stories, and their gifts with us. So I'm honored to have the amazing Neda Sarmast with us. Welcome, Neda.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with you.
Yes, Neda, if you are not familiar with her, she was born in Iran and moved to the US at 9. She's going to tell us more about her stories, and what it was like growing up and experiencing the Iran-Iraq War and what happened in 1979 Iran hostage crisis. And she has such an incredible story of coming to the States and then getting into the music industry. She has 3 decades of experience in managing and doing PR for some of the world's biggest bands. And then what she was called to do deeper to go back to Iran and film this documentary that became really well known called Nobody's Enemy about the youth culture in Iran. And I wanted to bring her here for Manifesting Peace because she really is all about bridging understanding and dialogue and among different communities. And, her mission, I think, is bridging culture with entertainment and transformation. So I'm honored to have you here, Netta. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Just hearing your words and just kind of reminds me of why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that the most important thing is that I'm not alone. So when I see other people that are in it, and finding my tribe, new friends, new people, I mean, I'm very blessed and grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I know you're in Istanbul right now, so I love that we're
Yes,
already communicating from around the world. It's perfect.
yes.
Yeah.
Merhaba, as they would say, hello. So I
So
should also
tell,
say I moved
yeah.
to US, I think, when I was about 6 or 7 years old,
Oh, okay.
a little earlier, and so yeah, that's how the journey began. It was before the Iran-Iraq War, actually, before the war had started.
Yeah, tell us a story of what happened and why, what it was like coming and not speaking English and what that experience was like.
Well, I didn't know. I mean, I thought I was just going to go for a holiday. When you're a kid at that age, when your dad just kind of takes your hand and you go. And I had no idea that it was my first time, obviously, going internationally. And I remember saying goodbye to my cousins and my family. And a couple of them were crying. And in my mind, I was like, "Why are you crying? I'll be back soon." And soon was not
Mm,
that soon, actually. But we
yeah.
came, actually, my stepmother was getting her PhD in psychology. So my dad, my older brother, and my younger brother, we all were planning on just going over there, staying in the US for a couple of years while she gets her PhD. And at that time, it was going to be a good opportunity for us to learn a new language, learn a new culture. And so with that, I only knew a few words: yes, no, thank you, hello, and goodbye. I think it was like, and I would always like rotate them. I didn't necessarily know when I should use them because I didn't know what the question was being asked. So I would just kind of
Right.
rotate the words. And I went to the first place we entered was Denver, Colorado. Just my brother and my dad at that time. We went there earlier to kind of get settled before we moved to New York. We went to Denver, and that was where I was my first experience in America going to school. And my dad went there one day to make the introduction between me and the school. And I thought, we're just going to go say hello to them. And he left me there. So here I am now, surrounded by these kids and this teacher. And I'm looking back now, I'm so grateful because what an incredible atmosphere it was. It was a very different atmosphere than the schools I later saw in New York.
Right.
The classes had bean bags instead of desks, and so we had bean bags, and then there was a rotating wall that would change, and then all of a sudden we're sitting in the same area. The wall would change, would turn our backs, and now we're in the music room, or now we're in the history room. And so, but when I first got there, I didn't know a word of English, and the teacher sat down and gave me a coloring book while everybody else was studying. And that was as soon as the break came in, everybody came around me trying to talk to me, didn't know a word of English. So they put
Mm,
me they had these student mentors that would take me aside for a few hours a day and put me at a desk with headsets. And, the English classes, the lessons would begin. And I had like this private tutor that would sit there and teach me the words, which I don't know if they still do that. I mean, there was a lot of personal attention
Yeah.
compared to my experience later on in New York when they're like, see you suckers, you're on your own. It was just, you're on your own now, which was again, I mean, New York became my home for, many, many years, and I love that,
Yeah.
spirit. But in the beginning, to have that few months of learning how to speak English and pronunciations and to at
Mm.
least give me a little, heads up on the language that and when you're young, you learn a lot faster. I see people
Yeah.
migrating later on in life, and I think after 17, 18 years, once you kind of go in there as a young adult or as an adult, it's much harder to learn the
Mm.
language and to assimilate inside, to mix with the communities. Some more, some less. But I was lucky
Yeah.
because as you're young, you can easily pick up the language and kind of get started. So I did that, and afterwards moved to New York, lived with my dad, my family, and then he was going back and forth, and that's when the Iran-Iraq War started a couple of years later. And we were supposed to go back, and we just kept saying things don't look so great. Let's just wait it out for a little bit longer. Let's, enroll you for one more year in school and see what's going to happen. Nobody knew what was happening.
Mm.
Nobody thought that it was anything serious. Even as the streets were, the protests and the news was coming, nobody really took it that serious at that time. So we kept saying, okay, let's go one more year in school. Let's not get left behind in school, and we'll see what's going to happen. And of course, it escalated into the huge revolution and the huge, transition that it became for the people and the hostage crisis. And at that time, we were able to just kind of still, even for the first, I mean, the war started in 1980 between Iran and Iraq and lasted 8 years. 1979 was a revolution. We were there probably around 1977 or something, 76, 77.
Mm.
So while all of this was happening, it still wasn't taken that seriously. And people were still coming and going. And it just escalated as time went by. And then suddenly it's a whole new regime, it's a whole new country, new laws, new regulations. And we had already started school, and we just said, okay, let's just stay here and then figure out what's going to happen. And my dad would just basically, he would go back and he would leave and go back to Iran. My stepmom was getting her degree. So we were just waiting, basically waiting it out. But I remember when I came to US, nobody even knew when I said, where are you from? And I would say Iran. People didn't know where it was. They had no idea.
Yeah.
They've never heard the name. They didn't know where it was. Not even the Middle East region was just never a topic. I
Hmm.
didn't even know that I'm Middle Eastern. We just didn't know. I just saw myself, sitting as kids. You're going to school, you see each other, different languages, but we didn't have these words. We didn't have religious backgrounds or what's your religion, what's your country, what's your language, or, your belief systems. And we didn't have any of that stuff. And of course,
Yeah.
later going into New York, still we didn't have that. There's
Right.
so many different people from all around the world. So it was never a conversation until the hostage crisis. And I
Yeah.
remember not people not knowing where I was from and mistaking it from Australia to this place or that place to suddenly everyone saying, "Oh, you're from Iran. You're from Iran, that place." And that's where the hostages are. And then I started to get some hate mail in my locker room. And then I started to get, go back to your country. You don't belong here. And you're not one of us, or give back our hostages. And I couldn't understand, like, what do I have to do with that? As a kid, at
Right.
that point, you're like 7 or 8 years old now. I don't know, maybe like 9 years old at this point. And I'm like, what do I have to do with that? I didn't have anything to do with the hostages. And so that's when I started to see what the separation and what the war and what these, beliefs, and we're kids. So of course,
Right.
I would go home and a lot of times I wouldn't tell, my stepmom, I wouldn't tell her what's going on because I didn't want them to get worried. So I basically handled everything myself.
Kept.
And I said, it's not a big deal. I'm okay. I don't want to get them worried. Or also when you're that young, you're embarrassed. You don't want your family to come in to have a talk with the school because someone's bothering me, so I kept it in. I
Right.
didn't say anything.
Yep.
But I do remember, there were some there were, there were a few occasions when I was getting kind of, I don't want to say threatened, that's too big, but you could definitely see the hate and making fun of each other and calling you names and just things that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
Um, After that, I wound up going to visit my dad for what I thought would be a 2-month summer holiday back in Iran. And that's when the war really started and really escalated. And at that time,
Mm.
a 2-month holiday turned into a 2 year, almost like a year and a half stay in Iran. So now at this point, my English is stronger. My Farsi was not as strong because I've been out for a few
Yeah.
years. You're young, that when you're all just speaking just English. I went back and I knew how I could understand the language. I could speak it, but not as good as them. So my English
Right.
was stronger. So when I went back, now I'm in Iran and now I have to go to school. Now they're speaking Farsi, reading Farsi, writing Farsi, and I was not good at it. So I was very frustrated. This is actually when I was about 12 or 13 years old at this point. So
Mm-hmm.
as a young teenager, to go there with my dad and having that experience. And now over there, I went to a school and the one of the, the deans or school teacher or, whoever would come in during the breaks when everybody would be out for recess and they're hanging out at the, just having their snacks or whatever. Then they would have these gatherings and they would have these slogans and just kind of, speak against the America and the Americans that did this and the Americans, and this is right in the middle of the hostage crisis. And they saw me now as the American. So they're like, hey, you,
Mm.
American kid, come over here. And then they would actually light the US flag and they would give me the lighter and tell me to light it. And at that point, I was like, I'm not lighting this. What is this? I just thought it was so stupid. And I wouldn't do it. And I'd say no. And there was this one woman who really had it out for me. The other teachers were great. Everybody was nice. The students, everybody was so wonderful and kind. I think it was just basically there was this one teacher that just didn't like me because I came from US. And she was just
Yeah.
trying to bully me a little bit. And, you have to light this flag. And I wouldn't do it. And then I had this best friend who was teaching me the ropes. Her name was Maheen. And she was my friend. She was telling me what to do, what not to do, and how to respond to them. And she kind of just looked at me and just kind of went like, just do it, just get it over with. So I just kind of just sat there. And there was like this piece of paper that was like they had drawn this, the flag on it. So I
Mm.
lit it up. And then as soon as she turned around, I put out the fire and I took it and I hid it under my dress, under my outfit, so that I can take it home with me. And I took that piece
Wow.
with me. And I saved it for years and years and years. And then somehow along in one of the moves and things, I don't have it anymore. But I kept that for years as a memory because I always thought it's so stupid. What do we have to do with all this? What do we
Right.
have to do with this war? So, and in Iran, I always found myself talking about Americans and how good they are, how the people are so nice and everybody's so friendly. They're just like us. They laugh at the same things. They eat the same things we do. So in Iran, I was saying that. And in America, I was talking about how Iranians are so friendly. They're just your friends. They're not what you see on TV. It's not the full
Right.
representation. So I kept constantly seeing myself um, and of course, as the years go by, as an Iranian American, to this day, I've sometimes caught myself. There's been very little time where nothing needed, there was no need to say this or to speak about this, because most of the time,
Right.
at some point, I would have to say, I would have to stand on my American side and stand up for the American, culture that I know.
Right.
And then sometimes I would see on the other side that they're talking about these young people. And I said, well, that's not who I saw. These are not the people. They don't hate you. They don't have any problems with
Right.
you. And I would stand on the Iranian side. So I was constantly,
Right.
going back and forth discussing. And then when I came to Turkey, here I am on both sides. Like, why are you here again? They thought I'm an Iranian spy. They thought I'm an American spy. They thought, well, why are you living here now? Well, of course, I mean, not everybody would have that conversation, but constantly always saying, someone was saying, now it's like, well, the Turks are this. I'm like, well, no, I live here now. Actually, let me tell you about my experience. And I think
Right.
this culture connect was something that's been so important for me because I said, if people travel and I would see more people. I would see Americans and Europeans going to Iran and traveling and coming here to Turkey and of course, a lot of different countries in America. I just kept saying, if people would travel and get to know some of these people, break bread,
Yes.
sit down, talk to them, drink some tea with each other, just anything, you wouldn't hate them. You wouldn't
Right.
fear them. You wouldn't fear them.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see that there. And it's so funny because my whole life I have heard, yeah, but you're not like them. Yeah, but you're different. But you're one of us because you grew up in
Right.
America. Yeah, but you're Iranian. You're one. I've always heard that. And what I'm really seeing is that no, I'm actually a good representation of all of them. I'm not that different or
Yes.
special. We're all like this. You just get out
Yeah.
there and meet each other. Just get out there and know these
Right.
people, and don't let a third person tell you who you should like and who you shouldn't, who you should fear and who's your enemy. And,
Right.
somebody else, like, then that's what I realized in my life growing up, is that I don't want people to tell me who my enemy is, because when I sit with them, they're not my enemy. I don't want to hate
Yeah.
them. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what country you're from. I'd like to look. I'm not perfect. We get caught up. We get angry. Sometimes you'll just say something and you just get caught up with the propaganda, and you get caught up with the feelings, the emotions. No one is perfect. I get it, but I try to catch myself and say, you
Yeah.
know, what do you think about this person? What do you think about, let people become responsible for their actions, instead of just a blanket statement about, these Jews, these Muslims, these Christians, these Americans and Iranians and Turks and this. I'd like to
Right.
hopefully put a change into that and say, let's hold people accountable, instead of just, putting a carpet statement over, you know, we don't even have the same people in the same family. Never mind the same community, never mind the same city or state, never mind the same
Yeah.
country. So,
One of the stories I love that you experienced, we're kind of like jumping ahead in your story, but is the time where you got asked to go on this trip in the desert with different people. If you want to just, I mean, I don't know if we want to talk about that first, but I think it's such an interesting segue, and then we can kind of talk about,
sure.
the backstory.
Um, it was Breaking the Ice was the name of the expedition. And I didn't know at that time, I had just lost my German Shepherd, which I loved, 15 years. That was my baby. That was my dog, day in and day out. And I was just in between that, and I was going back and forth in Iran. I had just made this documentary, Nobody's Enemy, on the youth culture of Iran, because I kept saying, you know, what I'm seeing on television after 9/11 is not the same experiences I'm having on that side. So I said, maybe I should bring their voices. And because of my background in entertainment, I said, what better way to, um, have this message? What better way to go out there and get this message out? If I'm using entertainment, if people are using entertainment through songs and music and news and film to get their message out, well, why don't I do that same thing? I can counter it, by my background. Again, I didn't know anything about becoming a filmmaker. That was not my agenda. It was,
Well,
it
let's
was a
uh,
message.
let's go back to a little bit because I want people to know a teeny bit of your backstory. So you finished school in America. You
I
are
finished,
in New York. Yeah.
I finished school. Well, after years of being in the music business, I had this one day when I was on a private jet on our way from New York to France to Cannes, and I was just surrounded by all these celebrities in the airplane, and we're sitting and we're talking, and I was just in that moment when I was like, I am so bored of these conversations. There's so much going on in the world, and no one's even talking about it. And I felt like I don't belong in that community anymore. And I love the community. I still do. I love the community, but I just wanted to find some purpose. I just wanted to do something different. My heart was calling me out towards a new adventure, and I didn't know what it was. So at that time, it was around, I don't remember if it was before or after 9/11. Now that I'm saying that, I'm actually forgetting if it's before, but it was around the same time at 9/11,
Yeah.
and it was after. And I remember sitting there, yeah, 9/11 had happened, and I saw again the same kind of feelings and the same separation and anger between East and West, us versus them. Those topics kept coming up again. And I said, this time, I was too young back then to get involved, but this time, with everything that I'm working on, I kept saying, this is not the full truth. This is not what I'm seeing. These Iranians are not your enemy. Like, they love Americans. They keep talking about Americans. They keep saying, tell the Americans we got this and we don't have any problems with them. And the news that was coming out from, the news and the government were so different than the people inside. And I wanted to
Right.
share that. And I wanted to, show the human stories, the human face. So with that, after that plane ride, I said, I want to get involved in something new. And of course, the world, as the universe will always, at the right time, um,
Yeah.
well, you would understand this. I manifested a new life and I wanted to
Yeah.
go into the direction, and the universe just kind of opened up the door and says, "Go after your passion." And at that time, my passion became to teach people about each other and about each other's communities and different cultures. Something that I knew about, and why at that time? Because I was afraid that we're going to go into another war. So my whole life has been always about, oh no, are we going to go into another war? Oh no, is this going to be another wartime? Because I'd experienced it during the Iran-Iraq war. So when I saw it now happening in America at an older age after 9/11, I kind of just saw myself as an opportunity here to stand up and speak up and say, hey, and people were once again saying, I would see people say, I'm not Iranian, I'm Italian. I'm like, I just heard you speak Farsi to your friend. You're not Italian, you're Iranian. And I
They're
was,
hiding that. Right.
they're hiding it because they didn't want, maybe some people just didn't feel like arguing. Maybe they didn't want them to, there was a lot of hatred back then, a lot of fear, a lot of
Yeah.
hatred. And I noticed it probably more with men than with women. I think men were doing that more. Women were, it was easier for them to, to talk about it and to say who they are without, worrying about it. But anyway, I started to see the atmosphere changing a little bit again. So I went and
Yeah.
made this film, Nobody's Enemy, which was the youth culture of Iran. Why? Because at that point, I think it's like 70% of the country was under 35 years old, and nobody was hearing their voice. Nobody was hearing their stories, and nobody was seeing that despite of all these problems and wars and issues that they were having, these people were really doing great. I mean, there was more, 65% of the university enrollments were women. A lot of them were joining the workforces, and a lot of things that were not being said. And I said, I want to go out there. And my background was music. And I said, how am I going to go? And, I was curious about what the music scene was like. I said, I'm going to go look at the music scene. I'm going to go and talk to them. And just really all I wanted to do was to show the Americans that Iranians don't hate you. They don't want to fight you. They don't want to kill you.
Right.
Iranian people are good people. They're hospitable, and just show the human story of that. That was really my entire agenda. So that in my mind, I said, if you get to know these people, you may not want to go out there and bomb them. You may not want to go and have
Right.
wars with them. So, and it was interesting because I remember, talking to somebody inside Iran, and it's like, you don't understand what it's like when we're always looking up to them and extending our hand, and what it feels like to see them looking down at us and not extending
Mm.
their hand. So that was something that I wanted to counter and to discuss at least. So with that documentary, that's kind of when my whole life took a new turn. And right when I was doing all of that is when I got, my dog passed away, and I was back and forth between Iran and what's happening with the country and filming. And then my friend called and said, there's this event. He goes, I can't tell you anything about it. You just have to say yes or no. We're not allowed to tell you. And of course, I'm like, I'm all up for a new adventure. So, and I said, well, where? Well, when? She goes, I can only tell you from when to when. But you're going to travel to some other countries and you're going to be around some other people. And the theme is people whose lives has been affected through the Middle East conflict, and people who have played a role to bring people together. It was unity and peace, and people from different countries will come together. That's all I knew. And I said, okay, well, can you tell
Yeah.
me how many? No. Can you tell me where we're going? No. Can we tell you which countries? No. All I can tell you is we got training for a couple of weeks, and we're gonna meet, and you'll meet everybody in person. But you're gonna have to, bring your passport, U.S. passport, and we're gonna, we'll handle everything for you, and we'll tell you where the airplane. So when I was on the airplane, I went in. I didn't know if it's like this is my final destination or if this is my connection destination. They
Right.
didn't tell us anything, and so we met in Jordan, was our first
Mhm.
meeting. And that's when I actually sat down over dinner and saw 10 or 15 other people that were involved in this expedition across the Sahara Desert, which I find out now. And these are the countries that we're going to go to. And these are the people involved. We had people from Israel, we had people from Palestine, we had people from Afghanistan, Ukraine. We had a Ukrainian soldier, a couple of German people that were involved with the expedition themselves. We had an Iraqi, we had the couple, we had a U.S. colonel, we had a U.S. Fire department chief that was there during 9/11. So he was a New Yorker, so I got along with him. It was a very interesting, and there was this one woman. There was only two of us, me and a woman by the name of Galit from Israel, and her mom had unfortunately died in one of the bombings, in one of the bus bombings in Israel. So everyone's lives was affected through the conflict because of the conflict. And
Yeah.
it was about, can we all get to know each other, and what would it look like in a small microcosm if these countries got together and spoke to each other, and what would be possible if peace was the mission here.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, it was a 2 month. At the end of the day, it turned out to be 2 months. We traveled across the Sahara. We went to several different countries. We went to Petra. We went to, all the way up to Libya. We went to Palestine and Israel and Egypt. A lot of places I didn't know. Very interesting. It was all, a
Yeah.
lot of the things I didn't know, and I got to know more about people as I'm riding, because we were days and days in this truck
Yeah.
facing each other while we're just driving for hours in the middle of nowhere, setting up a
Mm.
tent in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Nobody's around us for days and days was really fascinating. And
Yeah.
looking back today, I was like, I didn't even think twice. I just jumped in. Like, had I
Yeah.
known, or had I was like, if I really did a deep dive, I probably would have learned some things and maybe been scared and not go and not get involved. And I went in there really kind of blind. And I think in
Yeah.
my life, I was saying this actually to our mutual friend Ofi, that most of the times in my life, when I dive in blindly, it's always been the best thing that's happened to me. When I've tried, because
Yes.
I'm an Aquarius, I'm an overthinker. So I'll sit there, I'll think it to death, and then sometimes it's a good thing for me, and sometimes no. And that expedition, I didn't even think twice. I didn't know if there could be dangers. I didn't know where I'm going, and not knowing was perfect, what I needed at that time in my life. And I learned a lot of things, like where I'm supposed to go and where I'm not supposed to be at, and what I'm not supposed to say, and who I'm not supposed. But I didn't know. So, what is
Right.
it they say? How's that say? It says, it's better to say I'm sorry than to ask for permission. So
Right. Yes.
I just
Well,
went in.
I want to hear when you first saw the other people, even you who is all about bridge building, you had your own kind of beliefs about some of the people. So
Being
tell
in
us about
Iran,
that. Yeah.
being in Iran and seeing, the hijab and the culture there, there was a lot of things you can't do, a lot of authoritarian, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Figures, or, they were basically telling you how to live your life and how not. Again, I say this, half of it is like life when I was in there. There were difficulties, maybe for me at my age at that time, because I can't
Right.
speak for everybody else. Everyone has their own personal experience, and
Yeah.
some of them could be as extremely as bad and impossible they can imagine, and some not at all. So I can only
Yeah.
speak about my experience. But I saw, when I first went in, I didn't know who was there. There was this a man who was a Friday prayer leader at that time for Palestine, and he was also part of the team. And as soon as I went, we kind of locked eyes, and then I was, everyone's kind of going around trying to say, "This is who I am. This is where I'm from. This is what I'm doing." And I heard a couple of people, and of course there was, Latif, who was the body double for Uday Hussein, was also part of the. Which I find out later on that he's had books written on him and films made about him, and blockbuster films about the Devil's Double was, I think, his book, and he had an incredible story. So he's Iraqi, he's Muslim. Then we had another friend from Palestine, Mohammed, who was also there. I mean, it was an interesting mix of people. And then this person who was this Friday prayer leader, and I'm sitting next to him, and I said, "Oh no, he's going to be with me too. He's going to judge me left and right. He's going to say I'm not a good Muslim. I'm not doing my prayers. I'm not wearing a hijab. I'm living in America, have lived all, I mean, not because of that, but figuring that, I'm completely westernized. So I didn't know if I'm going to clash with him or not. And here we are when I realized we're going to be in the desert together with nobody else for a couple of months. I'm like, if you don't like somebody, you're stuck with them.
Right.
Of course, he didn't come for the entire duration. I think he only stayed for maybe the first week or so, and then afterwards he had to go back. So he wasn't there with us, but we got a chance to get to know each other for, I think, maybe 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But even then, 2 weeks, who are these? Not just him, but who are these people? What if I don't get along? And
Right.
Galit is the only woman. What if I don't like her? What if it's just the two women can't stand each other? What if we got all of these things? And it was none of that. We all got along great. After the couple of months, of course, everybody was getting on each other's nerves because you're sitting in these two, trucks, no space. One of them is an old, like 1940s fire truck. The other one was like another truck, and we were all just squished together, sitting side by side, and we would all fight and do
Mm.
coin flips to see who gets the better chairs, who's going to get on this truck,
Yeah.
because one of them was comfortable, the other one was not comfortable. So, we all, it was like, you know, I'll give you more food tonight if you let me sit on the seat tomorrow, on the comfortable seat tomorrow. So we had some of those kind
Yeah.
of bets with each other. But when I sat with him, my first thing was, we're not going to get along, and he's going to judge me, and he's going to tell me, what to do and how to say. And I just had my preconceived notions, even
Yeah.
though I was talking about, let's not be that,
Right.
but you can't, it's kind of like in your mind, it was embedded. So the first 2 days, we just, as you get to know, and as you get to know the person, everybody's kind of loosening up. We're tired, we're exhausted. There's times now all of a sudden everyone's wearing their comfortable clothes. No one
Right.
cares. No one cares. Makeup gone. The funniest thing is, I did take to the middle. It was like the funniest joke of the trip. I took one of those mini little blow dryers. And was like, you took a blow dryer to the exit. And we did one day, we found this place that had like the tiniest little running water in this little oasis. And I was under there washing my hair, and there was a plug, and everybody's like watching me. I'm like blow drying my hair in the middle of the desert in Egypt with like nobody. And I'm like, I just wanted to see what my hair looks like again, you know? So there were certain
I
things, a
love it.
girl's got to be a girl, At the end of the day, I'm
Yes.
like, please, my hair. So,
Oh, it's so funny.
but
But you
sitting with
ended up,
him,
yeah.
sitting with him, we got to know each other more. And, we had like conversations, and he was telling me about his family, and he had, I think, 10 children. And I'm like, well, how many wives? He's like, well, how many do you need? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, you're Muslim. I mean, some are okay with marriage. He goes, no, I just have one wife. And he was just constantly talking about his wife. He was showing me photos of his children. This one's going to school. This one's becoming a doctor. This one's doing, just really working on his family, and just raising, being a good dad. And I kept looking
Yeah.
at him. I just see what a gentle soul this person is. What a gentle soul he is. How, how smart, how wise he is. How, there was arguments going on once in a while. He was the quiet one. He would sit there. And one day before he left, when, we got to really become good friends, he had invited me, and we actually did. At one point, we all visited his home, saw his family and his wife and his children, and, saw the way he was living, just kindest, nicest people.
Yeah.
And we just sat, and I looked at him, and I said, I have to apologize to you. I said, without getting to know you, I thought I was not going to like you.
Yeah.
And he looked at me, and he kind of chuckled and laughed. He goes, I thought I would have to teach you some lessons while you were on this. And I was like, yeah, that's what I didn't want to hear from you. So we're laughing. But he said, I also learned something from you. We both at that same time. He's like, you taught me that just because someone doesn't follow the faith normally as the way I follow it, doesn't mean that they're not a good Muslim or that they're not a good
Mm.
human being. And I learned from him. And I said, just because you're, represent a religious leader, it doesn't mean that you have this thing in your mind that just because somebody is like a pure Muslim, or someone's going to be, authoritarian, or he's going to be strong-minded, or he's going to tell me what to do. He wasn't any of that. And I said,
Yeah.
I learned that after this trip, I'm never going to look at Muslims or people that are extreme religious type. I was just not a religious person.
Right.
I'm very spiritual, but I was never, religious person. And I said, I'm never going to look at anyone who wears the garb, or who is an imam or a leader, a Friday prayer leader. I'm never going to look at them and judge them, prejudge them again. And he
Yeah.
said, I'm never going to say that if someone doesn't look like us or doesn't follow it, exactly as we follow it, doesn't mean that they're not a good Muslim or good. He goes, to be honest, he goes, I have to tell you, I've met a lot of people in my life, and if I had to say, I would say that you're probably one of the best Muslims I've ever met. And
Mm.
you're not even fully, observing it. He goes, the main principles of what the faith teaches, you are that. You're living that in your life. And I see it now getting to know you. And I said, yeah, the main principles are beautiful. I mean, all the religions, if you look at the main principles, and if unity and the main um, lessons or the main message are there, if we just take that and just, leave the rest away, these are about being the best you can be. So I learned
Yeah.
then to, even me, to not judge and, let people, allow people to live who they want. And even if it doesn't look like, if it doesn't sound like my life or my lifestyle, if it makes you a better human being, then God bless you. Then that's what it's
Yeah.
about, you know?
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting trip. I learned a lot from that. And I learned a lot from him, even though he wasn't there on the full trip. And as I'm talking to you right now, I just realized that whether I just got like, the hair goosebumps. I just realized
Yeah.
we haven't talked to him in years, and I'm wondering with everything that's been going on, I wonder how he is. I'm gonna try and see if I can track him
Yeah.
down after this interview.
Yeah. Do that. Yeah. Ah, yes. See, so beautiful. No mistake in the universe. And I
No,
love this message of we're all one. We're all one. All the world religions are so similar. And, I think that if anything, like all the other speakers in this conference, talking about how we can bridge, communication and realize that we're all part of one race, the human race, right? And
absolutely.
um, how do we want to live and take care of our planet and, in this new age that we're stepping into right now. I would love for you to just share because we
And I
like
want to just
glanced
say
over.
this,
Yeah,
as you said this, the majority of the world is this is how they think.
yeah,
We're fighting against a group of people that don't want us to unite, that don't want light to win over darkness, that don't want that. And maybe this had to happen so that the light workers, so that the people all stand up and kind of shine their light up to the sky so they can find each other, so that we can
yeah,
unite. Because this peace-loving people, good people around the world, outnumber and outweigh all the darkness and the bad people and the people that are trying to divide us. That's not going to win. And my whole
right.
life has been involved in some form or another based on politics and life and war. And the only thing I really can walk away from, what I know fully, is that the good outweigh the bad. And
Yeah,
that's something to just
yeah.
hang on to.
100%. It's just a few people who are trying to tell stories about us so that we don't talk to each other. But actually,
Or
when we talk to each other, like you're saying, and break bread, and actually, you did it in the extreme, right? Traveling in the Sahara Desert with each other. But when you just have a conversation, you realize the commonalities, right? And I think that's
absolutely.
what it's all about. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love
Sorry,
that. So
I cut you off before you were going to ask me another thing. I'm sorry.
no, it's all good. I was just going to say, people in who are listening don't know your whole story of New York, and you're a teenager waiting tables at a restaurant, and tell us just like how you even got into the music business, because I love how you just keep saying yes to opportunities, and I feel like the universe just takes care of you. I mean, because you were like saying, "Oh, I was on this private jet with all these people in the, music business," when I realized like there's got to be more than this. But how did you get there from leaving Iran, like and what what happened?
I was living on my own. I started living on my own from a very, very young age, like even before finishing high school. And that's because of the war, because, family couldn't come. It was not easy to travel back and forth at this time. And so I was a bit of a rebellious teenager at this point anyway, because by the time I came back to US, I'd lived through war. My best friend passed away in the war and
Mm,
one of the bombings. She actually at a very young age, she had a heart attack, I was told. I don't know. The story has changed in the last few years a little bit, but as a result of the war, she's no longer with
she
us.
died. Yeah.
And so life was always, has been around that. And so when I was with her in Iran, when bombings were going off, and when we had blackouts, mandatory blackouts, we would sit. We were neighbors, and we would sit on the floor with candlelight and listen to put on tapes. It was Bee Gees and Donna Summer and Barbara Streisand, and those are the people that we wanted to, just listen to their music. And she didn't know English too well, so I would sit there and translate the lyrics for her, and that became our thing, to be together in the middle of the night. Things were just going off and everybody's just, but in our own little world in the room, we're sitting on the floor being like two young teenagers listening to music and translating it. And she's like, wow, that's so pretty when they said this. And so that was and she's like, one day you're going to work in music, and you love music so much. And I kept like, I don't know what that meant, being a musician. She goes, and I thought that she meant I'm going to become a singer, or, get into that world, which
Right.
I never felt like it was a calling for me. Years
Yeah.
later, no one knew that as I'm a teenager living in New York, that I was working at restaurants. I was trying to pay my bills. I was going to school. I was working, day and night, working in restaurants, different restaurants, all nice restaurants in the city.
Yeah.
And one of them, I wound up working. I don't even know how I got the job, but I got the job. And it was a place called Metropolis. It was on the
Okay.
Upper West Side in New York. It was like on 80s and Columbus Avenue, I think. And it was a very big restaurant. It was a very modern restaurant. It was an up and coming place. Everybody was going there. Celebrities were going in. So I started working as a hostess and became friends with the managers. We all became like this super, super, close knit family.
Yeah.
And we all, because, you're working so many hours next to each other, the chefs and, the waiters and the
Right.
hostess, managers and the owners. And you had all these interesting people come in and go in. Looking back now, it would have been a perfect sitcom because there were so many interesting, funny stories in that restaurant every day. And so, I was very young, and I always dressed, more ladylike, and I presented myself well because I wanted to be taken seriously, because I was always worried because I'm living alone and I shouldn't be taken advantage
Right.
of. So I got to be careful. So I always played this role of someone a little older. And one
Mm.
day the owner came up and said, well, we're going to make you an assistant manager, but just don't tell anybody because you're too young. I think I was not even 17. I think I was
Mm.
16. I was 16, but I was playing a role of someone who was, older so that I can become the assistant manager. And I knew how to speak to people, and I would, remember people's names. I would remember their personalities, and I'd start conversations with all of them. They all, as soon as they come in, we'd all know each other, talk for a few minutes. It was a very close-knit family until one day the owner came, and the manager or partner, there was Donald Zuckerman and Mindy Birnbaum. I'll never forget those two names because they came in and one day they called me down. They're like, listen, the restaurant's going to close. We know that you're living alone. You're on your own. We're going to try and see if we can find a new location for you. But just to let you know, we're going to have to close. And I was like, what am I going to do? I have to pay my rent. How am I going to live? And so Mindy made a phone call for me. And Donald used to be in the music business. So he was managing Patty Smith,
Yeah.
and he was her manager. So we'd always have a lot of celebrities and music people coming into the
Yeah.
restaurant. And so Donald had some contacts, and she's like, "Well, Donald and I talked, and we're going to try and see if we can get you a job in one of these offices in the meantime. And I think you'll be great in it." And I said, "Okay." I've never worked in an office in my life. I didn't know anything about music business. What do you
Yeah.
mean music business? Business? How do you make money in music? Can you sing and people get money for that? It's like, I just thought, I didn't know it was a business.
Right.
So they introduced me to someone by the name of Sheila Klein, and she was the office manager. And there was a company by the name of International Talent Group, ITG, and they were a very boutique but famous, the it company at the time for booking agencies for booking tours. So at that
Yeah.
time, we had tours for, Pink Floyd and David Bowie, Duran Duran, Depeche Mode, Sade, Peter Gabriel, Genesis, Phil Collins, all of these, Pet
Yeah.
Shop Boys, all of them, and The Cure, and all. And I said, okay, whatever. I need a job. So they set me up with Sheila for an appointment, and I went in. She met me. She saw me, and she wasn't amused. she was she was like, wait, you're how old? And you've never worked in an office? You don't know this? You don't know that? And you've never typed? And I'm like, nope, 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 nope. And I was like, yeah, this is not going well. So I left. She's like, well, I'll let you know. I said, okay. 2 weeks later, I didn't hear from her. And I was like, I need money. I need to pay for my bills. So I called her up and I was like, I'm so sorry. I really need this job. I said, you didn't say no. So I'm assuming I still a chance.
Yeah.
And so she finally, like a week after that, she's like, okay, come in. Here's the deal. We're going to give you a 2-week trial. Nobody wants you to work here. The bosses, we're in the middle of a very busy tour year. Our summer tours are starting. We need somebody on the phones. I heard that you're really good with talking to people on the phone. I'm going to teach you the system. But just to let you know, nobody wants you here because they don't have time to teach you. So if any questions, anything happens, you come to me. Do not go to the agents. Do not go to anybody else in the office. Just come to me. And I said, okay. So I went there and I can't tell you how many mistakes I made and how many dumb questions I had. And thank God she was there alongside. Like I didn't know what a fax machine was. And I was like shocked at what I'm like, really? This goes to Australia at the same time? She's like, oy vey. She was always saying like, oy vey. So she's like, please don't tell anybody. Or somebody would come and ask me to put a label on a one of the agents says, send this to with a messenger and put a label on it with their address. And I'm like trying to squeeze in the little file labels and put the entire address on a file label. And then Sheila would come in. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, how do you put all this address on this small label on a file? She's like, oh, hey, I can't. Come over here. Don't let people see this. So she was always made sure that I didn't get fired before I even get hired. And then 2 weeks later, my very first concert was The Cure. And which was amazing. The magnificence of the music, the sound, the energy. I mean,
Yeah.
it got me. I got bit really hard. And I was like, this is what the music business is like. And this is what, the projects can look like. Look at the stage, look at the excitement, the people, thousands of people. So after the concert, everybody gathered around and I saw people walking around and they all brought in a bottle of champagne and a champagne glass and everybody had it. And they said, here's to NEDA, our latest member of ITG. And they said, welcome to the team. And I got goosebumps right now, even just saying it. But at that moment, the first thing in my mind was, oh, good, I can pay my bills.
Yeah.
Because that's like, I didn't even realize what an opportunity and how lucky I was to be in that
Right.
office and to work with those people and to learn from the biggest and the best right off the bat. Years later, I would understand what people would go through just to even have an opportunity to get into a situation like that. So it was pure luck,
Yeah.
God, universe,
Yeah.
the angels working overtime to put me. And of course, my angel was Sheila. And Sheila, unfortunately, passed away due to cancer years later. She was the first person that opened up my bank account. She was the first person that helped me out with so many different things. She was the first person that ever took me to my first manicure, professional manicure. I
Mm.
mean, she became like my big sis slash aunt slash best friend. And
Yeah.
she had my back and she taught me everything. And years later, I said, why did you give me that chance? Nobody wanted me to work there. And she said, one day I looked at you and I said, one day you're going to give me a job. That's how sure you were about yourself and your capabilities. And I wasn't. I just knew that if you teach me, I learn. Just give me a chance.
Right.
Let me just prove you. And I said to her, I said, give me a chance and I won't let you down. And that's when she gave me the job. And because of that, I work so hard to make sure that she's proud of me, that I don't mess up, so that she's like, don't embarrass me. I'm the one that stood out for you. Don't let me lose my honor for hiring you. And I never did. I stayed over
Yeah.
hours when people went home. I would stay there till a few hours after everybody had gone, read contracts, learn about the unions,
Mm.
learn about the industry, learn the telex machine back then before the faxes and telexes was the thing, how to send messages because I wanted to stand up for myself. And also, Iranians also have very strong work ethics. It's very
Mm.
important to, have your ethics and have to show your respect in your job and your business. On top of that, wanting to make Sheila, happy that she hired me. And sure enough, years later, as I moved on from booking agency, I went on to management. I worked with, Bon Jovi. I worked with Motley Crue and Skid Row and Scorpions and this amazing new band that I was working with, The Front, that was signed back then to Sony. Later on became Baker's Pink. Amazing talent, amazing people. And years later, Sheila's job had, they would shut down their offices, and I was able to actually make a reference for her, a referral, and she got a job. And
Yeah.
so that came happen, and I was just beyond. I mean, she was just, thanks. I'm so happy because I knew it one day you would, but the fact that how we came full circle and that I was able to do that for her and to, make that, and I think most of it is like I just wanted her to be proud that she didn't make a
Mm.
mistake by hiring me. That yes, I
Yeah.
was a newbie, I didn't know anything, I had no experience, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there, maybe right now, even listening to this, that one day you're going to see that you may come from no experience, but your potential, if you have it, you don't know who's living and who's hiding under that dust, that if you dust them off, that they could have like the most incredible, um, they may just prove you right in a lot of ways. So I've always
Yeah.
tried in my heart to pay it forward, help people, give people jobs if I could through myself or my connections or whichever way I could. And my mom would always say, because you're always looking at everyone's potential. Instead of just like,
Yeah.
everyone's, some people are living into it, but you're always trying to search for that potential. I said, because I'm one of them. I was one of those
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah. And then you leave the music industry, you're managing Bon Jovi, you're on a private jet, and you're like, there's more to life than this.
how boring. Another concert. I mean, I look back now, years later, I'm like, oh my God, those were some of the most incredible, best moments and days of my life. We worked hard, just because
Yeah.
it was music didn't mean that it was always fun. We had a lot of stressful days and nights and concerts and travel the world with them. It was incredible, but it was also
Yeah.
work. It was a job. And oftentimes it was a job that didn't really have any, beginning or ending hours. Sometimes you'd be there from
Yeah.
morning till midnight and spend the night at the office till the next day because you're dealing with other country, time zones.
Right.
So it was a lot of hard work. But yeah, it got to the point where I said, okay, I've done that. I started so young, but after several years of this, I said, okay, what next? And I think what all those feelings and emotions, the first time that I experienced during the Iran-Iraq War, after 9/11, it kind of opened up again. It was probably a wound that wasn't fully healed. So then
Mm.
those stitches kind of opened up, and I said, oh, here we go again. There's that separation. There's that ugliness that people are fighting with each other and the image that people have. And it just happened to coincide around the same time where I just wasn't happy, fulfilled anymore. And I said, so who am I? What's next? And I didn't know what's next. I didn't know what I was going to walk into. And here I am
Yeah.
starting from zero again. With all my experience, who would I be if I'm not this person from music? So, I mean, it's been a few times in my life that I, went up the hill and did really good for myself and then came right back down and started from scratch again.
Yeah.
Was it smart? I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it was always, part of my life journey, I guess, to try on
I
something
think,
completely different.
yeah, and I think it's inspiring for everyone listening today because I think people are like feeling, a lot of people, at least who I'm talking to, are feeling the need to do something that's more meaningful right now. And so
Purpose.
just hearing how you left, and then you, speaking of paying it forward, like Sheila did for you, in Nobody's Enemy, you discover this musician and
So in Nobody's Enemy, I'm in Iran. Before that, I just want to say, in what you just continue to what you just
yeah,
said, it doesn't matter if you don't know. A lot of times I
yeah,
had no idea what's next. So maybe somebody is listening right now and they don't know, they have no clue. They just know that they're not happy. They're
yeah,
lonely, they're not happy, there's something is missing. And I think once you're in that dialogue that inside your mind, just having that dialogue and just putting it out into the world, just searching and looking and paying attention to different things, suddenly the answers will show themselves. The next
yeah,
phase of life, your next step will show itself. So for me, it was this documentary. I went to Iran. Naturally, I was curious about the music scene. And I had a cancellation one day because they were afraid of me and the cameras. They thought maybe I'm going to misrepresent them. They didn't know who I was. Trust was a major issue there. But the fact that I come from the music background and I also was Iranian, I speak Farsi, they, would, a lot of people would say, okay, but just don't, don't change things around. Don't change the narrative and, say something that
right,
we didn't say for your own, efforts. I said, no, 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 I'm not going to put you in danger. I just want to show people who the real heart and soul and the heartbeat of this country is. And so they canceled. And then my sound guy said, well, there's this guy that's in the studio tonight. And I just called him. He said, it's okay if you want to come in with the cameras. And, his name is Yasser. And he's a hip hop artist. He's a rapper. And I said, rapper like what? Like Farsi rap? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh no, that can't be good. That cannot. And I'm like, I was just like, oh no. I was having such a good time until now. Now I'm gonna like start seeing something, I was kind of like put in this place of, do I want to show that? Do I not want to have, it's gotta be bad. And I was a little bit cocky because of being in music for years. It was like, is it up to par? Is it gonna be good enough? And so I said, but everything got canceled. And I was with all the guys, the camera, myself. And I said, let's go. We went into the studio, we met him, and he opened the door, and he was surprisingly, very open in front of the camera. He said everything he wanted to say. He was easy to speak with. He was very smart, very intelligent, deep voice, good looking guy. And I'm looking at him, I was like, well, I guess we got to go hear the music now in the studio. So he was working on a song, which was called Bam, which is a city, an area in Iran where at that time they had an earthquake and about 50,000 people
Mm.
had died. So the song was about the earthquake. So he really sang about social issues and social topics of the country. I said,
Mhm.
okay, let's go. And he turned down the lights and they put on the music, and it was him and his producer and his one of his co-producers and the studio guys. And they turned down the music and we started listening to the song, and I was like, okay, the beat is good. The beat is nice. Then he starts rapping, and I was like, what? And I couldn't believe how good it was. And I was shocked. And we listened to the song, and I looked at everybody around the room, and I saw the camera guys, like this big, guys, they're like wiping away tears. And I looked at the other one, he's wiping tears. I looked at my friend Sarah, and I looked at her, she was like in amaze. She goes, this was so good. So I was surprised. And I said, oh my God. He goes, well, yeah. He goes, poetry is in our blood. We're Iranians. We have,
Yeah.
Persians have poetry in the blood. We've got Hafez and Rumi and Sadi. And now it's just, I'm singing poetry, Farsi, just to, beats, to hip hop beats. And it
Yeah.
worked. And I was shocked.
Yeah.
And then later on, the next couple of days, he and his music partner would come in and play me some more music. I say, listen, I work in music, and I see a hit, and I recognize this, that you're going to be a hit. I just don't know the industry. I don't know the Farsi community. I don't know the Persian community on this. I don't know. I don't have contacts. I don't know anything. I don't know how I can help you, but I can tell you that you're good. And so I was filming and I was going back and forth. I went to New York. My production partners were like, this guy's really good. I was talking to him and this really outspoken college student, Sayeh, which means shadow in Farsi.
Mm.
But she was really smart, really intelligent. And I was like, she's a good representation of the young women in Iran, the college students, and then it's him in the music. And so I kind of focused on them. I spoke to other people as well. The elections were going on at that time for 2005.
Mm.
But they said, if you know this guy, let's do more stories about him. I said, yeah, I do. And so I went back and I was like talking to him again, take more footage. And I was just like, you're really good. And, we were talking together. He was introducing me to his family so that I interview his family, his mom, his, triplet
Mhm.
sisters, his brother. And there was like a little connection there, but he was younger than me. And he was Iranian. So I'm like, nah, this is not something, this is not. But I was like, I'm feeling something. There's like the eyes are saying something here. So fast forward, before I came back to US, he kind of just said, hey, listen, I just wanted to ask you a question. Should I wait for you? Will you come back again? I was like, yeah, I'm going to come back. And he goes, no, but should I wait for you? And I was like,
Mm.
oh. So fast forward, my husband is now at this point, we get married 2 years later. It took us a couple of years. And now I'm managing him. And I said, listen, I don't know anything about the industry, but I'll do what I think may work here. I just want to get your voice out there because you're really good. And right away, people just started responding to him and his music, and he just got better and better. So we became this really cool, power couple together. He was doing the music, I was doing the management, but we were like traveling. We're, between the Farsi language and the English, and it was fun. It was fun. It was great. He had a lot of incredible music that made a difference for people. whether it was to stop people from, suicide, or whether it was drugs, or whether it was, all the main problems that society would have. And it was just kind of in his own way trying to make a difference and give hope to people and to bring, and
Yeah.
we were a good team, and we did a lot. And the documentary, it wasn't even finished when I went and gave a lecture in Washington, and then all of a sudden I had a bunch of people, student leaders, followed me in, and they said, "Hey, listen, we want you to come and speak at our university. Can you show it?" And I said, "Well, the film is not finished yet." They're like, "No, it's finished. We just saw, like, the first sample. Just come as it is." And I said, "Okay, well, I wasn't planning on turning it, into a big movie anyway. It was the
Right.
message." And I said, "So here it is. Once again, walk into the unknown. I don't know, but okay, if you want me." And then before I know it, I got a call from someone who's like, "I want to be your representative and be your lecture agent. And there's some universities that are interested in you. Would you do it?" I said, "Sure," and didn't do that. Then before I know it, I'm giving a commencement speech, and I said to myself, who would have known that I'm going to give a commencement speech at a university when just, a few years back, I couldn't even speak and say hello in English. And to go
Yeah.
there, and I said one day I'm going to go back to that school in Denver and thank them, because they were the ones that really started me off. And I never forget someone who helps me out, in my way.
Yeah.
So, we did that. And his name is Yas. He's a very, very, still to this day, an extremely famous, probably, the top hip hop artist in the country, with incredible messages in his music. And he's, known. I remember when only two or three people downloaded his song, and we were so excited. And then now he's got millions and millions of followers, even outside. He's been covered by all the major, American press and media and MTV and this. I mean, he's been all over, from Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, so his voice was able to get out there. And we did good.
Yeah.
We did divorce about 10 years afterwards, but to this day, we are still friends, and we do still work on some projects together, and we continued the respect for each other. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, walking into the unknown led me into a whole new world that I never in a million years could have even imagined.
Yes. Oh my gosh, there's so many stories. I feel like the more we talk, I'm like, oh, and this, like
It was actually, divorcing Yas was, at that point we were separated, but divorcing him or separating from each other was the reason I came to Turkey. I just needed to
Mm,
change. Once again, I had never known, I'd never been to Turkey before. I didn't have anybody here. I didn't know the language. I'd never visited. I just packed up my bags and I said I needed change, because my heart was broken, going through
yeah.
separation. And I didn't know what's next. I didn't know if I wanted to stay in New York, stay in America, work in music. At that point, music, I was sick of music. I didn't want to work in the music business.
Yeah.
Everything was reminding me of, back in the day with, the music business in the US. Then it was the music business with him in the Iranian market. I wanted nothing to do with entertainment or music. I also, I was just didn't know what's next once again. So I packed up my bags. I didn't renew my house agreement, and I said I'm going to go to Turkey. Why? Because I saw a Turkish Airlines commercial, and on TV one
Because
day
I love Turkish coffee. It's my favorite.
I was sitting home. I was sitting home crying in the living room one day, just sad, feeling so bad for myself. And then I was watching CNN, and in the middle of it, there's this commercial for Turkish Airlines. It's like, "Come to the magical land of Constantinople." And I was like, well, a lot of people kept talking about Turkey for years. I'd never been to Turkey, because I would either just fly right to Iran or I'd go to Europe, but I'd never
Yeah.
been to Turkey. And I said, let me just pack up my bags and go for the summer there. And then I'll figure it out. Because then I'll have friends from Iran, my family from Iran would come and visit me. And I needed a break. I just needed like my
Mm,
posse around me, because my heart was hurting. And then I came here, what I thought again would be just like a summer holiday. And then I just kind of, with 5 suitcases,
mm,
just in case, I put everything in storage. And then just in case, I brought my summer clothes and my winter clothes. And with 5 suitcases, I mean, that was fun, going into taxis, and I couldn't fit everything in. And new people, new country, new language, didn't know anything. And I just settled, and this country just hugged me and just
yeah.
felt welcome here. I felt like it was a complete combination of East and West. It
Mm,
was Muslims, Christian, Jews, it was Europeans, it was Iranians, there were Turks, everybody was gathered in this one place. It felt like New York City mixed with Europe and,
Yeah.
Italy mixed in with Middle East. It had modern and
Yeah.
old and new and everything mixed together. So it was very fresh,
Yeah.
very different than what I expected. And I took the challenge of Turkish Airlines commercial, and I came here. And sorry, I stayed. Now you got to get rid of
I
me.
love it. I love it how the marketing worked on you from marketing. Yeah. I love it. It's so perfect. And so, like, just all the leaps that you've taken in your life and all the connections you've made and the difference that you've made through following your heart is just so inspiring. And so I'm grateful that you're a part of Manifesting Peace. And I feel like, as an Iranian American, is there any sort of message that you want to get across, especially to, people in America and Europe who I think are the most people watching this conference, that you might want them to know about right now?
Okay, it's Iran. A lot of
Yeah.
people are going to be like, it's Iran. So as an Iranian, because we get that all the time, like Iran, they went to Iran. It's like it's the nerve. Everyone's
Iranian,
like
as an Iranian American, is there a message that you want to get
Iranian
across?
American. As an Iranian, I guess, I mean, what I'm seeing now more than anything is fear of
Yeah.
war. And as a result of fear, the first thing that happens, you start finding what separates you from each other, and you start getting scared and you start getting angry. And as you get scared and
Yeah.
angry, you start hating because if something doesn't make sense, or you want to run to your corner of what looks familiar. And if someone's idea and life and storyline is not familiar, your immediate thing is to attack it or to hate it or to separate yourself from that. Um, I've done this in myself a few times. There's been certain things, or I'm not perfect. I'm a human being. I get caught
Yeah.
up. I get caught up with, with all the other isms that's happening around the world too. And I made a promise to myself that if I have any kind of a second doubt, or if I have any kind of bad feelings, or if I don't like someone or something, I'll try and dive into it more. I'll
Mm.
try and, if I don't like this kind of, I will go and sit down with them and sit and get to know them. And 9 out of 10 times, my thoughts and my feelings would change. So what I'd like to, you are a sign for me in my life right now, because as I'm walking into what's next for me, which is starting my own podcast and interview series and bringing people together, introducing them, that I kept saying, now I'm manifesting a new life for myself, and that would be through the world of bringing people together and reconnecting with the American community and bring them here. And as I was manifesting that, you came into my life. So you to me represent that something is working, that it's real,
Mm.
that if you think about it, and I didn't know it was going to be a woman by the name of Jen through my friend Ophira. And, I didn't know, and I'm not attached to the house anymore. I'm attached to, just manifest and just be patient. So the message that I have is don't be scared. It may get uglier before it gets better again. I've been through war, and I've been through 9/11. I've been through Iran-Iraq war. Now I'm going through what's happening now again with US and Israel and Iran, and even maybe even Turkey, God forbid, is going to get involved. And, I'm still here. I'm not scared anymore. And I think more than ever, my message is that all the good people, all the peace loving people, we're always the quiet ones because we don't want to get involved. We don't want to get into an argument. We don't want to fight someone. Even if we don't believe them, or if we believe differently, we're like, I'm not going to get involved. It's not my war. It's not my fight. I'm not going to do it. The only thing I have to say is that as a result of that, sometimes the dark energy, the darker frequencies, and the darker intentions have won. That doesn't mean for the long run. But, my thing is that if you're seeing this, and if you believe in uniting people, and if you believe in people coming together, and if you believe in peace, and if you believe in that we're human beings, that we may come from different backgrounds, but we have so much in common. And in our core, in our heart, we have love for each other and respect for each other, even if it looks different, then stand up and speak up to your friends. than say something, than, in your own little world, in your own little, whatever it is. If everybody, if all the good people kind of stand up and kind of unite, we'll
Yeah.
realize how strong and powerful we are. And
Yeah.
and sooner or later, our voice will not allow the wars and the darker spirits and the darker, intentions take over. Maybe we have to go through this in order for people to unite and for once and for all stand up and say, we're kind of like we're all earth angels. We're all uniting with each other, and we're not going to let, bad win. And maybe that's what it,
Yeah.
maybe if I have to look at it and say, what's the good that's coming out of that is maybe everybody else will stand up together this time and say, I'm not
Yeah.
going to participate. If it's something that doesn't feel right, if it doesn't, if it's causing me to hate you, if it's causing me to separate from you, if it's causing me to want to go and, bomb these people or bomb that person, and if it's causing that inside of me, then, maybe I'm going in the wrong direction and maybe I'm not going to participate. And by not
Yeah.
participating, it's incredible to see what can happen.
Yeah. I love that. I always say in manifesting, we live in a participatory universe in quantum physics, right? We're all participants. We're not observers of our lives. We are
Yes.
active participants. So life isn't happening to us. We're actively creating our lives. So I love that you said, like, we have a choice in what we participate in. So, Neda, thank you so much for being a part of Manifesting Peace. That was the perfect message to leave everybody with. I'm so grateful that you are here. I'm excited for your new podcast. We'll share it with our community when it is live. I know you've already started recording it. Um, and yeah, we're all participants. So let's all manifest peace together. And if
Thank
you,
you so much.
yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
so
Netta.
much. I'm blessed to have you as a new friend.
Yay. Me too. Me too. And I want to say for all of you listening and watching, if you love this conversation and got some value out of it, please share it with a friend. I think the more that we hear these conversations, the more aware we are and the more that we really will manifest peace in the world. So thank you. Yay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.